There we go. All right. So we are live. Now, today's video is all about daily fasting, which is something I generally don't recommend. However, given, the time of the year, it's Ramadan, there's been a lot of different inquiries coming in saying, hey, you usually don't talk about doing daily fasting because you don't recommend it, but what if I have to? What if I'm doing this for religious purposes or whatever? Well, regardless of what your stance is, regardless of what you're doing, let's talk about daily fasting. Let's talk about some protocols because this is something that's been asked a lot. So we're going to discuss, okay, if you have to go about intermittent fasting on the daily, okay, every single day, what do you want to be doing differently? How do you want to position your food? How do you want to time your food before and after a fast, of course? And of course, during, obviously, there's some different things with Ramadan. So we'll talk about this. So I think this is going to be just good information for everybody, not just for people that are going through Ramadan right now. So without further ado, I do want to go ahead and get started, but please do comment where you're watching from just so that I can say hello. I'm trying to get the lighting right here. It's been a little bit, I know the background's a little bit blown out, so I've got a light here to try to help me with that. Appreciate everyone being here, first of all. So we've got, oh man, Lexington, South Carolina in the house. We've got so many people here. This is awesome. Just so you know, I've got my webcam up above my camera right now. So if I'm looking down, it's simply because I've got the chat box pulled up in front of me. So this way I can bounce back and forth and see the questions that people are asking and things like that. Forgive the juvenile backwards hat. Much like any of you, I haven't been able to get a haircut because I'm on lockdown and they're making sure that barbers don't work right now. So bear with me for the juvenile appearance. Okay. Anyhow, we got Canada in the house. We got Fallon, Nevada. We've got Maryland. We've got, holy cow, we got Newberry Park in the house. Awesome. We've got Tennessee. We've got Wisconsin, Tucson, Rochester, England. We've got Arkansas, Little Rock. We got Dayton, Ohio. This is awesome, you guys. You guys are great. And if you can, please do hit that thumbs up button and then hit that little bell icon. That way you can turn on notifications. And then also please do share this live broadcast if you know anyone that's going to get some benefit out of it. Okay, so let's just jump right in. When you're looking at Ramadan, there's a few things that we have to pay attention to the most. Okay, so daily fasting, in the sense of Ramadan, you're fasting obviously from sunrise to sunset, which is not a tremendously long fast, depending on where you are in the world, but it's consistent, okay, and it's daily. And this can cause some metabolic stress on people, right? I talk about in a lot of my videos, I don't generally recommend intermittent fasting daily because you have a degree of metabolic slowdown that's going to occur from that, right? If you're reducing your calories tremendously every single day, then yes. Now, the saving grace, if you want to call it that, within this style of fasting is that you can eat prior to your fast starting in the morning. So you don't have to be doing these long, crazy fasts every single day. Okay, let me put it into perspective. If you're fasting every single day and you don't eat something prior to embarking on your fast in the morning, in this case, right? Okay, so if you're fasting from sunrise to sunset and you don't eat in the morning, then you're doing a very long fast every day with a very small eating window. That can work very, very well. But my concern is that, upwards of 3 weeks of that, you're going to start running into some issues where you might develop some metabolic slowdown. So you just have to really be aware of that. So what I generally recommend, and what I've told a few people that have asked me, is at least a few days per week, do go ahead and eat something in the morning, early in the morning, prior to embarking your daily fast, right? So then, in essence, you're only fasting for maybe 14 hours or so, maybe 12, 14. But at the end of the week, your overall net amount of calories that you're bringing in still ends up being at a loss. So you still end up getting some good success that way. Now, I do want to talk about things like breaking the fast properly, proper hydration, because again, when you're looking at Ramadan, you're looking at a situation like that, you're not drinking fluids either. So you're effectively dry fasting during this period of time. Now, when you're dry fasting during this period of time, things change a little bit, okay? Your gut mucosal layer can go through a lot more of a breakdown, which means that when you do eat something, you can trigger a lot more inflammation potentially, which is not something that we really want, okay? I mean, the purpose of fasting for a lot of people from, of course, a non-spiritual perspective is inflammation related. There's countless bodies of evidence that show modulation of nuclear factor kappa B, the NLRP3 inflammasome, different inflammatory signaling, transcription factors, everything like that. So we don't want to put ourselves in a spot where when we break our fast, we just trigger a bunch of inflammation by just bombarding our bodies with the wrong kinds of foods, okay? So we'll talk about that. We'll break that down. You guys go ahead and please do comment where you're watching from if you're just hopping on here. I got to adjust this light. It's killing me. There we go. So let's talk a little bit about how you want to break this fast, okay, during Ramadan on a daily schedule, right? Again, it's very, very common practice to break a fast during Ramadan with dates. And I'm not saying don't eat dates entirely, but remember that dates are fructose, okay? Fructose only gets metabolized in the liver. It does not replenish muscle glycogen. Okay, so remember this when you're breaking your fast for Ramadan. If you have a copious amount of fructose, you have a high likelihood of that going to what is called de novo lipogenesis. That is where the body takes the excess carbohydrates and converts them into fat. Okay, it's a very normal process, a very annoying process, a very unsightly process. And if you're not careful and you have more than 30, 40, 50 grams of carbohydrates coming from fructose, there is a very solid chance that you can develop additional fat from that. So what I highly recommend is, yes, I understand that it is common practice to have that fructose after you break a fast. So that's fine, have it, but limit yourself to 1, 2, maybe 3 dates, okay? Now here's the other side of the equation, something that's really, really fascinating. If you're not doing keto or anything like that, I highly recommend that you combine having that fructose with a little bit of a high glycemic regular carbohydrate. Okay, so what that could look like, this is again, hypothetical, right? What that could look like is going to be some dates along with a little bit of rice or along with a rice cake. Now, this comes down to something that I've talked about before, which is a specific protocol for actually enhancing carbohydrate uptake in the body. What we want to have happen is we want to have the cells utilize the glucose properly. Okay, so when you're finished with your fast, the last thing that you want is to be glucose intolerant. Okay, glucose intolerant, simple example, just like the name implies, if you break a fast and you're glucose intolerant, it means that your cells are not going to be very good at using glucose. So what does that mean happens? Well, it means that you're left with a high degree of glucose in the bloodstream because it's not getting into the cells. Now, again, I don't know if you're keto or you're not keto, whatever. Point is, glucose intolerance is never a good thing. We don't want that to have happen. Why? Because elevated levels of blood sugar they're not just bad because we hear about them with disease states. Okay, elevated levels of sugar in the blood will trigger glycation of specific proteins. They can trigger glycation of fats and things like that. And that glycation is what can trigger a lot of different inflammatory responses in the body. And that can make us feel sick and that can cause issues. So that's what we have to be careful of, is having this excess sugar floating around. So whole wraparound thing of what I'm trying to say here is you want your body to be able to utilize the glucose properly. And this is a long-winded explanation for why you need to be eating dates a specific way, but it makes sense, okay? So if you have those dates, that fructose is going to ride a specific transporter, okay? It's going to ride a transporter that specifically takes fructose, GLUT5, okay? So that transporter takes the glucose to where, or the fructose to where it needs to go. Glucose coming from like, a rice cake or rice or a regular starch rides a different transporter. If you have a bunch of just fructose, you're going to overwhelm the transporters and they're not going to be able to deliver all the carbohydrates at once, which means you're going to be left with excess carbohydrates that can go through de novo lipogenesis, excess carbohydrates that can contribute to high blood sugar. Okay, big problems, right? But if you split them up evenly with a little bit of fructose and a little bit of glucose, again, a couple of dates, a rice cake or two, well, those two different forms of carbohydrates are going to ride different transporters. They're going to ride different buses. And what that means is that even though you're taking in, again, hypothetically here, you're taking in 40 grams of carbohydrates. It's just random number, okay? If 20 of it's coming from fructose and 20 of it's coming from glucose, at least you're going to absorb all of it because 20 of it's riding one transporter and 20 of it's riding another transporter. Whereas if you were to take 40 in of just glucose or 40 in of just fructose, it's going to overwhelm the transporter. Does that all make sense? So I want to, by show of just what people are talking about here in the comment section, can you comment if that makes sense about combining the dates or combining the fructose with a little bit of the glucose? Just go ahead and let me look here. By the way, thank you for all the positive words here. It really does. I really do appreciate it. Yeah. Nancy says you're eating 1 or 2 dates, but you can also break fast using milk or water. Very true. Okay, cool. People are saying that this is making sense. Yeah, I don't want anyone to overthink it. It's complicated. I'm sorry, this light is just too much. Hang on here. There we go. That's a little better. I don't want anyone to overcomplicate it. Daily fasting during Ramadan is not something you're going to be doing forever. So I don't want you to be worrying about this, developing the perfect protocol. What I'm trying to do here is help you out with damage control more than anything, making sure that you're not going to go backwards. I've talked to probably 5 or 6 people so far that have been doing Ramadan for, about a week, and they're gaining weight. And they're like, I don't understand. I feel like my calories are lower. Why am I gaining weight? Well, to some degree, it's a metabolic slowdown that could be occurring just in this short amount of time. But I think more than anything, it's probably just an imbalance of where the macronutrients are coming from. And that's why I'm trying to at least give some guidance there. Okay, now let's talk dry fasting for just a little bit. Dry fasting, again, whether you're doing this for Ramadan or not, dry fasting is something that is very powerful in a lot of different ways. I'll give you some reasons as to why it's hypothesized that dry fasting is so effective. Again, one of my duties here running this channel, I see a lot of people, I meet with a lot of people, I reach a lot of people with my videos, so I have to be very careful with what I say. Okay, I try not to overstep. And part of my duty to science and part of my duty to research is to not say something's proven or totally demonstrated 100%. We see things in science, we try to challenge the hypothesis, right? That's the goal, is to get better. We've seen things like demonstrated through kind of anecdotal stuff that when people dry fast, they tend to lose more fat. And there's this theory that does make sense that you have what is called molecular water. Okay, so when you breathe in oxygen, okay, you get oxygen. Well, fats are broken down in our body and we have hydrogen that ends up getting released and things like that. Well, what happens when you have hydrogen that mixes with oxygen? H2O, right? Water. So there's this thing in our body that's called molecular water. Our bodies have the ability to create some water, or so it seems. So when you dry fast and you go through a period of time where you're not consuming water, it's theorized that you could be creating some water in and of yourself. Well, in order to create that water, you would potentially be drawing from fat, combining it with oxygen that you breathe and creating water. Well, that sounds like a pretty cool deal to me, right? Sounds like a cool deal to go without drinking water and have my body take fat, break it down, combine it with oxygen to make a magical water. I mean, again, I say that with a grain of salt, but that's kind of the theory behind dry fasting. So a lot of times people that are going through Ramadan, they end up having a lot of success with fat loss if they do things right. Excuse me. This is not a product plug. In fact, I'm going to block the label so it doesn't look like that. But it is water kefir, which is a lot like kombucha, but check out. I'm not going to show you the brand name. Yeah, just show you 3 grams of carbohydrates in the whole thing. Anyway, back to basics there. So if you can come off of the water fat or the dry fast properly, then yeah, you can end up actually having the right level of success. But I can also see people gaining a lot of weight when they come off of dry fasting. Now, one person in particular, you're probably watching, you know who you are, had mentioned to me, yeah, hey, whenever I dry fast, I feel like I end up retaining a lot of water and gain weight right afterwards. It's a pretty common response to dry fasting because when you're not consuming water and then all of a sudden you have water, what's the body going to do? It's going to hold on to that water for dear life. So it's just like if you were to cut out sodium entirely and then all of a sudden have a bunch of salt, you would probably be a lot more sensitive to the salt and you'd retain a lot of water, right? So pretty common response. Now, how do you get around that? Well, proper hydration is going to be key. So during Ramadan, it's not recommended that you ingest anything consciously, right? Okay, it can somewhat be forgiven if it's accidental. So I don't even recommend taking supplementation during Ramadan. Just if it's for religious purposes and things like that, I understand that and I respect that. So I am not going to encourage anyone to take any supplementation. But after you break your fast, what you might want to do is drink 1 or 2 pints of water with a larger concentration of sodium than what you normally would. Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to chug a bunch of water and it's going to deplete your mineral balance even more. So envision this, okay? You've been going for 12, 14 hours without drinking water, without consuming food. What's your body going to do? Insulin levels are crashed. They're low. Good, but it's an issue in this case, right? So what's going to happen is the kidneys naturally have a response where they're going to expel additional water. So you come out of a fast pretty dehydrated and pretty minerally imbalanced. So after you break your fast, it's important to get some sodium in so that your body can upregulate and rebalance a little bit more. If you were doing this once randomly, it wouldn't be a huge deal. But my concern is with people that are doing daily fasting during Ramadan, you have you're doing this frequently. So it may not hit you day one, it may not hit you day two, it may not even hit you day three, but later on down the line, you're going to potentially, again, I'm being honest here, I just don't want to say anything concretely with specific situations. There's a high chance of you becoming minerally imbalanced over a course of days. So my recommendation is to definitely make sure that when you break your fast, you're not flooding yourself with a bunch of water, because what's that going to do? That's going to dilute what little minerals you do have in your body even more. So you urinated out a bunch of minerals, then you pounded a bunch of water without having adequate sodium or adequate minerals. And then what minerals you did have left in your body just got diluted even more. And then you urinate more and you lose those. And then day 2, day 3, day 4 comes along and you're very minerally imbalanced, right? So add the salt at a higher concentration after you break your fast. This also goes in line with that GLUT transporter situation I was talking about, the GLUT4, GLUT5, that whole transport system. Okay, GLUT1, actually, GLUT1, GLUT5. Okay, so if we have this glucose coming in and fructose coming in, well, they get absorbed into the cell through these what are called sodium-gated channels anyway. So these sodium-gated channels allow S-GLUT1, sodium-dependent glucose transporter 1, to open up and allow the sodium and the glucose into the cell. My point is, if you're minerally imbalanced, you're not getting enough sodium, the water and the glucose, it can't even get into the cell to begin with. I know I'm rambling. The point here is your cells, when they need to use glucose, it is sodium dependent. Okay, that's why it's called sodium dependent glucose transporter. The glucose can't get into the cell properly without sodium essentially opening the door. So if you're minerally just out of whack, there is an argument that that could get thrown off and you, again, glucose intolerant, causing yourself an issue, right? So I just recommend having a higher concentration of salt, having a little bit of fructose, having a little bit of glucose, and of course, having your protein to whatever your desire is there. Pause for just a moment, just say hello to some people that are here. Want to make sure this is making sense for everybody. I know there's a lot of people that are going through Ramadan right now that are very appreciative of this video, and I'm seeing it here, and I really, I'm glad that this is helpful for people. Again, and you know, I know there's going to be people that are frustrated that I'm talking about this from a specific Ramadan sense, but you know, I have a duty to all of my followers, regardless of any stance on anything, right? So my duty is health, period. And I want to make sure that people do this right. So like it or love it, there's the door if you don't want to be here, right? So is this making sense for okay, perfect. People say, yes, understand. Thanks for giving this info. What about protein for breaking the fast? Okay, cool. Let's talk about protein for breaking the fast for a minute. So protein, again, when you are breaking your fast with the fructose and the glucose and the salt, you are having a nice little insulin spike. It's not a bad time to be taking in some protein. I wouldn't recommend taking it in the way of dairy, okay? Because again, dairy is going to be pretty inflammatory. And again, depending on where you stand from a religious standpoint, some don't even want to have dairy at all, right? So I would recommend getting it in as lean and clean of a source as you possibly can, okay? So if that means lean chicken, or if that means lamb, or if that, whatever it is, try to make it as lean as humanly possible, okay? Now, you're only going to have a short period of time before bedtime that you actually can eat. So this is where the whole kind of paradox comes in. I don't want you to load up on a bunch of food, because I did a video a while back. I can probably link out to it down below somewhere, on something called metaflammation. Now, metaflammation is not a scientific term. It was a term that was given by researchers to a response to something called the PKR. PKR was really interesting. It's an inflammatory reaction that usually responds to RNA and viruses and things like that. But they noticed that when people, or rodents in this case, consumed a copious amount of calories all at once, they had an elevation of something called the PKR enzyme, PKR protein. This PKR protein triggered an inflammatory response that mimicked that of fighting a virus. What that implies and what that sort of demonstrates is that when we consume a lot of calories at once, our body doesn't know how to assimilate all these nutrients, so it perceives them as a threat. Now, this is my general concern with 1 meal a day, okay? With 1 meal a day type diets. I'm not anti 1 meal a day. I did it for a long period of time, but like many of you, I have ups and downs of different things, and I look at the research. when you bombard yourself with calories, your body doesn't know what to do. Okay, it's a lot of calories at once. So what I don't want people to do here is consume a ton of calories at the end of their daily fast and then just go right to bed. You're better off to do what I suggested, have the 20 grams of fructose or so, 20 grams of glucose, some protein, some lean protein, and then maybe an hour later, get your fats in so that you actually get a well-rounded, good nutrition, right? Then go to bed. Okay, then get up in the morning, do your workout before the sun comes up. And I know this is difficult, but if you're committed to this process during Ramadan anyway, I don't think it's going to be a problem for you because I know you're motivated. So you get up, you do your workout before the sun rises, and post-workout, you go ahead and you have your protein and call it a day. Okay, have your protein, wait a little bit, have a little bit of fats, and then when the sun comes up, you start your fast. Hyperhydrate prior to the sun coming up, right? Prior to beginning this fast. Now, we've only got 1,000 people on this broadcast, which is disappointing, but I think it probably has something to do with YouTube just not serving a lot of content in general. So, because I know I've seen probably tens of thousands of requests come in for this video. So hopefully people are going to be able to see it. And just a quick shout out, just because it's part of what I have to do and part of my lifestyle here and part of just this channel. There is a link down below for Thrive Market. They're a huge sponsor and supporter of this channel. So if you're watching this broadcast, I highly recommend that you check them out. I know these are crazy times for the whole world right now. So Thrive Market is still shipping. They do still have product. They still do have food. So if you're not wanting to go to the grocery store and deal with the long lines, if you're not wanting to deal with just going out of the house and dealing with the chaos, I do highly recommend that you check them out. And a big thank you to them because they are one of the ones that make this channel possible. And again, I know some people jump off when I talk about sponsors and stuff like that, but it's the way it is, guys and gals. It's the way it is. If this channel wants to stay alive, we've got to have good sponsors. And it's just my job to find sponsors that align with what I talk about. So big thank you to them and highly recommend you check them out down below for some good things to break your fast with and to eat pre-fast and post-fast. Okay, jumping right back into this stuff. Sultan, you're very welcome. Someone said, a lot of people saying thank you for taking the time on this. Let's talk about, supplementation. This is a great one. Okay, so supplementation during Ramadan. Again, a lot of people are kind of coming and going on this broadcast, so I have to repeat myself a little bit, so I'll keep it short. I do not recommend taking anything during your fast for this case. I do recommend if you want to have some caffeine, have it before you embark on your fast, because I understand it's dry fasting. You shouldn't be breaking in any fluids. But do not take any supplementation. You do not want to take away from the entire purpose of the daily fast, right? To become closer yourself, closer with the earth, closer with your religion. That's important. So don't take supplementations, but do it after the fact. Now, one of the things that I highly recommend, again, vet this out with your doctor if you wish, but after you break a fast, is getting your inflammatory levels in check a little bit using some tried and true methods, usually fish oil, high omega-3 that has been shown to have some good modulation effect at the NLRP3 inflammasome level, different interleukin cyclooxygenase enzymes. Basically, what you don't want to do is have a big influx of inflammation like I talked about after you break your fast because you just brought in a bunch of food. I started to talk about this a little bit ago, and then I kind of got off track. When you are dry fasting, when you're fasting in general, not even dry fasting, your gut mucosal layer gets a little bit weaker. Okay, it goes through sort of a rebuilding. Well, remember, we need collagen. We need all these things to actually rebuild that gut mucosal layer. And when you are deprived of protein or deprived of calories, you can find that the gut bacteria will end up sitting closer to the epithelial cells, meaning you have less of a protective barrier there, less of a protective wall at the end of a fast. So that means that you have a higher likelihood of what are called lipopolysaccharides, which are little proteins that live on the gram-negative bacteria membrane within our gut. They're perfectly fine within their ecosystem there. But if our gut gets damaged because we've been fasting and then we took in a bunch of food, those lipopolysaccharides may enter through the epithelial wall, past the enterocytes and get into the bloodstream, triggering an interleukin response, triggering a cytokine response, which causes chronic inflammation, systemic inflammation, which we really have to be careful of. When you're dry fasting, this happens even more, unfortunately, because, again, you don't have fluid. That mucosal layer is just like snot. I hate to be graphic, but it is. So when you look at your gut, the mucosal layer is mucus, just like snot, right? So it's a lot of fluid, it's a lot of water, and then it's a lot of collagen and it's other things. So if you break your fast and you're eating a lot of food, then you have a high degree of potential lipopolysaccharides that get into the bloodstream. So my recommendation there is Do what you can from a food standpoint to mitigate that. Do what you can from a supplementation side of things to mitigate that. One of my go-tos in that is going to end up being good high quality omega-3s. So fish oil. If you're doing Ramadan and you're keto, you hopefully have a high degree of anti-inflammatory beta hydroxybutyrate ketone bodies that are offering a layer of protection there too. But I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of keto versus non-keto on this. So anyway, point is very minimal supplementation, but probably things like fish oil or omega-3s, algal oil. Highly recommend magnesium, simply because magnesium has so many different functions, especially at the ATP mitochondrial level with MAG2, the transporter that allows. Anyway, I can really nerd out on this stuff, and I've been diving into a lot of research on that. But basically, omega-3s, magnesium, probably would recommend even vitamin C, just if you're immunocompromised from the fast. Again, very careful, especially with what's out there right now, to not say vitamin C is going to do anything in particular. But I think you've probably heard me talk about it before, so we can just leave it at that. There's a super chat that comes in that says, I'm doing keto with IF. I can't get enough protein. I get dietary protein around 40 grams from dairy and the rest from a whey protein drink. Is it okay? Urmalesh, I would highly recommend that you try to get protein from a little bit more well-rounded source than just dairy. The nice thing is you're getting some good conjugated linoleic acid, which has some powerful effects, but I would recommend getting protein from a little bit more diversity there. Okay, a couple people have asked about bulking during Ramadan. So, and actually it's a great time for me to, again, I have to, there's one person that, again, he's probably watching this right now. Working out, if you can work out early in the morning, great. Okay. If you're bulking, I wouldn't be opposed to you working out at the end of your fast. Okay. End of your fast, and then leveraging the end of your fast as a perfect time to be ultra insulin sensitive. So this is something I've talked about before. This is fascinating stuff. By the way, hey, everyone that's getting some value out of this video, can you please hit that thumbs up button? It helps me out a lot. It really does show that there's some support on this channel. When you've got over 1,000 people on a broadcast and you're only seeing a few hundred likes, it makes you wonder if people are just spacing out. So please do hit that thumbs up button. It helps me out a lot. Helps YouTube show that this is not garbage content, so they don't shut this channel down like they're doing with lots of channels right now. Anyhow, back to the working out piece. So during your fast, you're highly, 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 highly insulin sensitive because you haven't been consuming anything. Okay. Well, remember that after a workout, you're also highly, highly, highly insulin sensitive. Okay. So combine the two and you could potentially be highly, 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 highly insulin sensitive. And what that tells you is that when you do consume food, it has a much higher likelihood of getting to the right place based on a lot of the research out there, even in various hypotheses, right? So if you come out of your fast and you just worked out and then you break your fast, well, potentially you're absorbing more of that protein and putting those carbohydrates to use a little bit more. Okay, you have insulin receptors that are essentially satellite insulin receptors at the musculoskeletal level. We want those insulin receptors. We want that to be hot. We want those to be able to absorb the glucose. So we want to be able to absorb carbohydrates that we consume and have it go to glycogen, not go to the liver. So what that does for building muscle, what that does for staying lean throughout this process is it means that when you are shuttling the nutrients into the body, they have a better likelihood of going to the muscle versus just kind of sitting there and going through de novo lipogenesis. More protein synthesis, more mTOR activation. Okay. So what I want you to strongly consider this daily fasting regimen as, and take note of this, everyone that's watching this, take serious notes. There's a couple things that I'm going to say in this that are very, very important that you remember. You need to envision this as very distinct individual short fasts, not lots of repetitive longer fasts or infrequently, right? You're going through a short fast and that's it. Okay. Do not have yourself go through this. It's so easy to want to just eat your food and then not get up in time and then fast the whole rest of the day and then eat your food. And you're basically falling into this cycle of one meal a day. Okay. I want you to break this up into just little teeny chunks, little increments, and it's going to make life a lot easier for you. And it's a lot easier to wrap your head around everything. Okay. Some good questions. He says he's not a doctor, but he knows a lot of information. I'm in med school and that's awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Anything special with working out fasted with regards to joint health? Ben, that's a good question, because working out fasted, especially in a dry fasted state, one could argue that you could be damaging your joints a little bit more. Um, I think long term, you're probably better off because the chondrocyte production that can occur in a or post-fasted state. Chondrocytes are essentially the cells that help grow cartilage. There's some evidence that shows that periodic fasting and caloric restriction can actually have an effect on stem cells in a positive way. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But again, if you're fasted and you feel dehydrated, yes, you could be damaging your joints a little bit more. So just be paying attention to that. How to deal with headaches the first few days of fasting. So again, a lot of times it's a mineral imbalance, but also if you're new to keto, you're new to fasting, it's also a hypoglycemic thing. So just make sure that, when you come off of your fast, that you're not loading up on a bunch of carbohydrates. So you're not sending yourself on that blood sugar roller coaster. If it's more of a pulsing headache, sometimes that's more of a, less of a blood sugar thing and more of a mineral thing. Anyhow, if it's more constant, a lot of times that's more indicative of a hypoglycemic thing. But again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm very careful to not say that improperly. Let's see. Sorry, some great questions coming in. What do you suggest to break fast with and eat for dinner? And I did discuss that, so you might want to actually rewind back and check that out because I went through it in pretty good depth. Sorry, guys. Anyone else have weird vivid dreams with zinc and magnesium? That's actually quite common. Believe it or not. Also make sure that sometimes magnesium supplements will have boron added in them, and sometimes boron has been shown to do that. Sorry, guys, I'm just reading through here. If we're on the phone, how do we do a thumbs up? I don't know. Does anyone know how to thumbs up when you're watching a live on the phone? Daniel says, I like to drink Optimal Nutrition Amino Energy drink in the morning workout. Does this break my fast? 3 scoops. Yeah, unfortunately, it does break your fast, so I would omit that. Feel free to have that right when you break your fast, though, and I think you'd be okay. Quickly, taking HMB and CLA, will that triple the effect, or is that old school? It is old school mumbo jumbo. Yeah, don't worry about that. Sorry, guys, I'm blazing through some questions here. Can we have keto with IF without having fat and carbs in the diet? I'm a fatty person doing 5 days weight training. I'm not sure I understand that question entirely. I discovered you a few days ago, started keto for the first time. Awesome. Let's see. Sorry, guys. Good questions here. Making sure I get some good ones. We break the fast with dates and fruit. What do you think? Abby, I did discuss that in quite a bit of detail. Explain, just for those of you that are just jumping on, only have a couple of dates. I know generally from what I understand, it's an odd number of dates. So I would say 1 or 3. Okay. 1 or 3 dates along with about 20 grams of carbohydrates coming from a clean, lean carbohydrate source, like probably some rice cakes or a red potato would be good. I get these, the little fingerling potatoes, and you can just microwave them. You can bake them. Just, don't add any fats to them or anything like that. And then a little bit of protein coming from a lean protein source. If you can get your hands on some good clean white fish, like some cod or something like that, that would probably be the best. What exercise should we do before breaking the fast? Is walking enough? So if you have the luxury of being stuck at the house right now, like a lot of us do, I would, and you don't have a lot of equipment, I would do a bunch of push-ups. I would try to get an anaerobic effect before you break your fast as much as possible. Now, if you go out and you wanted to do some cardio, want to do that, that'd be great too. But I'd love for you to be able to get those carbohydrates to use that you break your fast with. So when you break your fast, consuming those carbohydrates, I want them to be able to go to use. I wrote down some notes here, just on a couple of things I want to make sure I cover. So bear with me. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I did. I wanted to talk a little bit about constipation, because I think that's a common thing, especially for people that are fasting during Ramadan that don't normally do intermittent fasting, right? Fasting during Ramadan comes on quick for people, and when they're not used to fasting, all of a sudden their bowels just kind of stop, right? Everything's just kind of seized up. Again, magnesium comes into play quite tremendously there. I want to make sure that you're doing what you can to hydrate before you go into the fast. If you can, take magnesium prior to starting your daily fast. So I don't recommend taking magnesium too much on an empty stomach, a whole lot, unless you're accustomed to it. So, if you're eating in the morning, take some magnesium along with that food, a couple 100 milligrams, then go through your day, don't eat anything, whatever your usual, and then break your fast and then add the magnesium back into the mix and make sure you're hydrated up. That usually ends up solving the issue. And you usually find after a few days to a week, things are starting to get moving again. In fact, fasting has been shown to actually improve gut motility, because you have to remember too that I always give the analogy of it's like an office, right? Okay, you've got a bunch of employees at the office, and then everyone goes home for the day, and the janitorial crew has a chance to come in and clean things. But if you still have people working in the office all night, the janitorial crew can't do a good job cleaning, right? Well, it's the same kind of thing going on with your intestinal tract. If you constantly are bombarding it with food and you're constantly eating food, then your body never has a chance to actually encourage gut motility and actually do that cleaning that needs to get done. Okay, so I highly recommend, for anybody that they go through periods of fasting, that they end up getting that good increase in motility. So you usually find that that'll improve. Sorry, other questions coming in. Hang on. Thoughts on Metamucil for getting the fiber and helping that? Yeah, psyllium is going to be okay, but remember, after you break a fast, you're going to be hypersensitive to that, and you might get a lot of bloating, so be careful with that. Apple cider vinegar and turmeric, from a cosmetic standpoint, will it break a fast? No. From a religious standpoint during Ramadan, I don't recommend taking it. That's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. But for those of you that are, again, going through Ramadan for religious purposes, you don't want to be consuming anything. But I would recommend the apple cider vinegar prior to going into your fast, prior to starting your fast, can bring your blood sugar down, which can make it so that the fast is going to be a little bit easier. So that might not be a bad idea for you. Another question that came in: what do you recommend as far as fasting and belly fat? Honestly, like I said, working out during the latter part of your fast for that case is going to be good. Let's see here. What are the instructions for daily fasting? Ross Q, I know you probably just hopped on here, but you're probably going to want to go back and watch the rest of this. So point is that if you're going to be daily fasting, it is very, very important that you're keeping track of your calories over the course of the week, okay? So I'm not worried about it if one day you only get 1,000 calories in. I'm not worried about it if another day you get 2,000 calories in. What I want is at the end of the week for you to be where your calories should be. Now, broken record Thomas here, because I talk about this a lot. If you know where your calories need to be for you to lose weight roughly, each day, multiply that by 7, get your weekly amount of calories, and that's your goal. Okay, so I don't care if you get there. Well, I do care, but if you end up eating 1,000 calories one day, 2,000 calories another day, 1,000 calories another day, as long as you're getting to your net result, your net number that you really be at, I think you're going to be in good shape. So I don't want people to overthink that. So the daily fasting, that's just what I highly, highly recommend there. As far as keeping the metabolism going and things like that, again, do not, and I repeat, do not every single day skip the morning meal prior to starting your fast. If you are someone that is not practicing Ramadan, that is just going through daily fasting, I highly think you should consider taking a few days off per week and not doing it daily. That's the best advice that I can give you, because daily fasting, in essence, in its very nature, is going to slow down your metabolism. But that's not a bad thing. It's just something you need to be aware of. Now, let me put things in perspective for just a second here, though. From any kind of evolutionary standpoint, and I don't, again, not talking religion, not talking anything, I'm just saying, like, if you think back ancestors, Paleolithic, whatever, it would make sense that those that are more metabolically efficient would probably survive better, right? If you had a gluttonous pig that was eating 10 times a day, and then you went into a time of famine, right? Well, during that time of famine, he's going to starve because his metabolism is so high from eating so much. So yes, he may have more body fat on him, or yes, he may eat more, whatever. He is going to cellularly end up having, metabolically having more issues than the person that has been spacing their meals out and hasn't been consistently eating and hasn't been a glutton. They're more metabolically efficient. Okay, so the person that's more metabolically efficient is the person that wins from an evolutionary standpoint. We today live in a different culture, in a different world, where it's status and it's cool to be able to afford a lot of food, and it's cool to be able to eat a lot. That has that mental paradigm, that social paradigm, is what's messing us up. Okay, as far as the human body is concerned, we are designed to become as efficient as we possibly can. And we are making ourselves ruthlessly inefficient by how much we eat. Now, that's my disclaimer, because I agree with people that want to daily fast, but I just have to make sure there's a big, bold red and yellow disclaimer, because if you do go through daily fasting, your metabolism will slow down. It's going to slow down because it's getting efficient and it's learning how to operate on less fuel. So it's sparing fuel, okay? But that's not what everybody wants. So, okay, fasting doesn't speed up your metabolism. Fasting slows it down. But because of the hormonal response and because of the enzymatic response and because of the healing response, it generally results in a much further superior body composition that people generally really like. So it's funny, but people look at me and they think that I have this crazy fast metabolism. I probably don't have the fastest metabolism. I probably have a relatively slow metabolism, but I'd like to consider that it's pretty efficient because I don't eat a lot. I probably eat 1,800 calories a day and I'm 185 pounds and work out a lot, but I'm not in a deficit. I mean, so I just want you to remember that because it's very, very, very important when you look at this big picture here. So Abby, again, with the dates thing, I went into exquisite detail with that earlier on. Alternate day fasting at 45 years old, should I eat more than normal on? Lively, I would say you should eat probably 25% more than you normally would on an eating day, but this video is predominantly on Ramadan with daily fasting, so I want to make sure that I'm keeping it locked in there as much as I can. How much fat? I mean, it's definitely going to be important that you're going to want to be able to, still get the fat in again. Okay. So obviously you break your fast, you've got those carbs coming in, that's going to change some things, but the next meal you should be adding those fats in just because I don't want you to go through any kind of issues where you're depriving your body of any good nutrients there. Let's see, good questions. HIIT or LIST before breaking the fast. If you had to choose between high intensity interval training cardio and LIST cardio, I would do HIIT. It's not too much stress on the pancreas to fast for a long time and consume 2 meals all at once. It's not that that's necessarily stress on the pancreas. I'm so glad you brought this up though, because this is something actually really interesting and something I've talked about in other videos. So someone made a comment that I look like a 12-year-old with my hat. I do, but I think it's probably better than this, right? What the heck? Is this even the Thomas that you guys know? Who am I? I don't even recognize myself. I can't get a haircut and it's killing me. So yes, I'm wearing a hat. Okay, so some interesting science that I saw regarding melatonin and its effect on the pancreas. So there was some research that demonstrated that after dark, you have surges in melatonin, which actually trigger the pancreas to produce less in the way of insulin, meaning you're less glucose tolerant. Okay, so it's actually very important. I'm so glad you brought this up because I totally would have overlooked this. When you are breaking your fast, yes, you're going to have some carbs come in, but I wouldn't recommend that you load up on a ton of carbs because you're going to inherently be glucose intolerant. You're going to inherently be glucose intolerant because it's post-fast. Okay, so you're already a little glucose intolerant. Your body's optimized for running on ketones at that point in time. But then you're also at this after hours dark time when your melatonin levels are higher. And a lot of times you see people end up having poor sleep during Ramadan, and it's probably because their blood sugars are all out of whack. Melatonin causing this glucose intolerance where the pancreas isn't producing as much, beta cells aren't producing as much insulin. That can be a pretty big issue. So I recommend breaking your fast, getting your carbs in the way of 20 grams fructose, 20 grams fructose from the dates, 20 grams of glucose, adequate amounts of protein, copious amounts of protein if you feel comfortable with it, because whatever excess glucose is needed will be derived from gluconeogenesis. But then an hour or so later, shut down the carbohydrates, have the fats a bit more. Again, note that if you're a science nerd, you're going to get this. Note that the fatty acids that end up getting utilized for fuel, that glycerol backbone that ends up getting cleaved off, this is nerdy stuff, will go through the Cori cycle, it will go through gluconeogenesis, and it will ultimately turn into glucose and fuel your body for its glycolytic needs, okay? Nerdy stuff, doesn't really matter. Point is, follows what I was saying there, and you probably will have some good success. One more last big shout out that I want to give to Thrive Market too. People are really understanding of this, the way the channel works, but financially, economically, YouTube I have to have sponsors, right? And I pick ones that are good. So big thank you to Thrive Market, online membership-based grocery store. So I linked out to them down below. I've created fasting boxes so you can get what I would recommend when I'm fasting, things like that, or for breaking a fast, keto boxes, thyroid support, hormone support boxes. They're a huge supporter of this channel. It's not tied directly to this content, but I just want to be able to say thank you. And there's a huge, special way for you to use them down below. So highly, highly recommend you check them out if you haven't already, getting your groceries delivered to your doorstep. Okay, I have time for one more question because I'm down to 7% life on my laptop here. Will drinking boiled broccoli, spinach water break a fast? Yes, it will. Good girl, I appreciate you saying that. She says, if anyone doesn't like to hear sponsorships, feel free to leave this channel. I mean, I know, right? It still amazes me. I need to do a separate video on the economics of YouTube. It still amazes me that people like think that this channel is just me with a laptop. Guys, there's a lot of full-time employees and like 50 grand a month in overhead to keep this channel going. Teenagers doing OMAD, I do not recommend it, but again, I'm not a doctor. R says, does fasted cardio burn fat? Literally, yes, through beta oxidation. Will it help you get leaner? It's probably a good chance, but it all depends, right? Can I build muscle with daily fasting? Yes, you could if your calories are in line and your epigenetics, DNA, everything like that is in line too, because it's all negligible if you're the wrong kind of, I don't want to say negligible. It's nebulous, right? It all depends on how your body is functioning, your hormones, so many different pieces. Okay, so how do we combat plateaus? Usually my best way to combat plateaus is reducing fat intake, to be completely honest, like during keto and during fasting. Take a couple days a week where you just drop your fat. I did a video where I broke that all down, my little experiment. But anyhow, guys, I was really, really pleased I was able to take some time to do this. Really pleased that I was able to help out those that are wanting to have the healthiest experience through Ramadan. I am not Muslim, but I have a lot of followers, a lot of people that watch my channel that are, and it is my duty to my fans, to my followers, to my viewers to just help everyone be healthy, regardless of who they are, where they are, color of their skin. We all got to be healthy. That's the one thing we have control over in this crazy time, this crazy world, is at least to some degree our health if we really just pay attention, right? Okay. So thank you all so much. And a new video coming out tomorrow morning. See you then.